Hello and welcome to the Farmer Supply Association Agri Report. I'm Randy Kopechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. Well, it's August the 11th as we tape the August program, and we had a huge rain over the last couple of days, so it was one of the bigger rains we've had in a while, especially this time of year. Rainfall amounts generally through the heart of the Farmer Supply Association area, it ranges from anywhere from 3 to upwards of 7+ inches. We really don't know in the heart of the area because our rain gauges, most of the rain gauges people I've talked to go to about 6 inches, and they were overflowing. So we really don't know how much it rains. I'm guessing 3 to 7 through the heart of our area. Now you get north of here and you get a little less. Get further south of here, you get a little less, but really a vast majority of our customers were in that range. So a huge rain for this time of year, obviously caused some problems, but then again, I think most farmers will take, we needed rain. We'd love to have gotten 2 inches. No, that's not the way it worked. We're going to have some damage from this rainfall, but overall, I think most farmers would take it over not getting anything and being in a drought. So we'll take it and move on, and hopefully we can adjust and still have that good crop that we think we've got in the field. We did have a couple other problems with that event. They were in the very northern part of our farmer supply area, maybe just outside of our area. I'm not exactly sure where it went through, but we had a huge wind event. Some 90-mile-an-hour winds estimated or clocked in the very northern end of our area up in Lawrence County, and could have possibly affected some of our customers up there. But again, that's not good, causing rice to lodge and other problems as well. So overall, we'll take it, move on, but there were certainly some problems with it that we'll have to deal with. There'll be some soybean damage. A lot of these ditches just back out when you have rains like that, and it takes a while for the water to get off. So we're going to lose some soybeans in those areas. But then again, where it gets off pretty quickly, hopefully the damage will be minimal, if at all. So anyway, that's where we're at weather-wise right now. Otherwise, our crop prospects continue good. I've been talking about that pretty much all spring and summer. Things have gone well. We've been on the fast track. Crop potential has been good, looks like all the way through, and I think for the most part it's still there, with the exception of these few areas that were affected by this storm event. So we continue ahead of schedule as well. I've used the term that we've been on the fast track. I think we're still pretty much on the fast track. It's the gap's kind of narrowed. We're not maybe quite as far ahead as we once were a month or two ago, but still ahead of schedule, and things are generally going pretty well. I think we got the potential for some phenomenal corn and soybean yields out there. I mean, on the well-drained fields that have gotten moisture, got planted early, I think the potential is really good for some outstanding yields on corn and soybeans. Rice, I'm still optimistic about rice, but rice is just a little harder to estimate. You get hot temperatures, cloudy weather, different kind of weather events, and it can affect your rice yields negatively. So I think we're all right. I think we avoided any of those bad situations that might really affect yields. But anyway, I think the potential is there for rice, but we won't know till the combine gets in the field, which is going to be pretty quick. So that's where we're at. I want to update everybody on the current considerations, things we need to be thinking about right now as we enter the home stretch and near the end of this crop year. As you can see, we're taping in a field of row rice or furrow irrigated rice. Our rice farmers obviously know about this, but some of the people that may not be directly involved in agriculture, I mean, we're growing rice in some fields without levees, just like we would water maybe soybeans or corn down the row. So it's a new technique being used over much of our area. It doesn't work everywhere. It's not something that's going to take over the world, but for the guys that have the right kind of ground, the right fit, it's really a good situation for them. So you can see there's no levees in this field. It's planted on 30-inch beds, just like they would plant corn or soybeans on. So that's kind of the situation with it. You can see there are no levees, and that just makes things a lot easier in most cases for the farmer. The variety out here is Rice Tech Full Page 7321. These are 30-inch beds, just like I said, that the farmer uses for corn. Herbicides out here have been Command and Sharp and pre-emerge, followed by Bolero and Prowl a couple of weeks after that. That's all our weed control. You see it's clean out here. Been a few pig weeds, but otherwise really a clean field. Nitrogen, a little different in this situation. We're not putting a flood on, so we don't do a pre-flood nitrogen application. What we do is make generally, in this field, they've done 3 100-pound shots of urea spaced about 7 to 10 days apart, and starting right when you would make the normal pre-flood application. and you can see the fertility looks good to me, so I think that's probably adequate for us out here. So 3 100-pound shots. Irrigation, real simple. Turn the well on Monday, turn it on Thursday, run about 24 hours, and that's all it's really been. Once the field got settled in, that's been the water system out here. So again, just pretty darn easy. It looks good. We'll see how it yields, and if it yields good, the farmer's going to want a little more of this, I think, on the ground that it'll work on. So that's where we're taping at. Again, a furrow irrigated rice field. Now I want to move to things our farmers need to be thinking about right now. Again, we're pretty much at the end, but there's still some insect situations. Irrigation termination we need to be thinking about, so we'll talk about that today. Number one, the insect situation. Been one of the lowest populations of insects I can remember in a long time. You know, I don't know if the past winter, the big freeze we had something to do with it or not. I usually think that doesn't affect much. Maybe it did, who knows. But anyway, our populations are generally lower than we would normally have in most years in our area. The main insects we worry about, of course, in rice, we worry about rice stink bugs. In soybeans, we worry about corn earworm. I've not recommended the field being sprayed with rice stink bugs yet. I've had some real close, but that doesn't mean we need to let down our guard. I've seen many times in rice where those stink bugs build up, and especially on that later heading rice, that has rice that's green after the rest of it's already getting ripe, that they'll really accumulate on. So I'd encourage our consultants, our farmers, I certainly will be in fields that I look at, to really keep our eyes. Don't let our guard down on these rice stink bugs, because they can build up and cause a lot of damage. The termination recommendation for rice stink bugs is 60% straw colored. In other words, 60% of that head or panicle being ripe. And once you get to that point and you're fairly clean, you know, you're below threshold by quite a bit, then you're good for the year. I was in a field Monday, a field that I've been monitoring for about 3 or 4 straight weeks, one of the first headed fields in Jackson County. And the numbers were up to about 17. So it was above threshold, but that field was about 80% ripe or straw colored. So I didn't pull the trigger on that one. I knew the farmer probably didn't want to anyway. But up until that week, numbers had been half threshold or less. So he did good until that termination came about. So I don't think he'll see much damage, if any. So anyway, that's kind of the story right there. Don't let your guard down on the rice stink bugs until you're at least 60% hard dough and you haven't had a threshold up to that time. So that's rice stink bugs. The other insect we worry about is corn earworm at this time of the year. And again, those numbers have been low. I've not recommended the spraying of corn earworm either. I know there's been a few sprayed. Most of that's been automatic spraying, or maybe some right at threshold, but I haven't seen any at threshold yet. And I think we're probably going to beat the corn earworm situation, except for maybe some very late beans. So, I never say quit scouting, don't do that. But I really feel pretty good about not having much spraying of corn earworm this year. Several reasons for that. I have a moth trap in the Wiener area on one of our farmers over there. The numbers have been really low on moths the last couple of weeks. So that tells you the moths are not coming in, laying eggs. So that's a good sign. A couple other things, the status of our bean crop. We got our beans planted early. They've grown off well. Most of the beans I look at is anywhere from the R4 to R6 range. A lot of them R5 getting into R6. And usually once our beans get that far along, they're potted up, they're canopied well. We just, generally they're not attractive to the worms. So that's a good sign that maybe we won't have to worry about corn earworms and soybeans. Again, don't let your guard down, especially if you have some late beans like wheat beans or something like that. If you got some beans like that, for some reason they're not canopied well, they're just blooming. Let's keep our eyes open, but I feel pretty good about avoiding most sprays for corn earworm. So again, it's just been a low pest year, and hopefully we'll finish out like that. Want to kind of finish up on irrigation termination. Of course, we're all in good shape right now after 3 to 7 inches of rain, so pretty much all the wells should be off now, but there'll still need to be some watering done after it dries up from this one if it doesn't rain again. It's not really forecast after this weekend. So corn, I think corn's all finished. If it wasn't finished, this weather finished it off, this rain event finished it off, so we're good on corn. Soybeans, let's take those soybeans all the way to when that soybean separates from that pod. We want moisture till then. Generally, you're going to see some color change at that point. Those beans are not going to be still that dark green. They're going to be getting at least some yellow tint to them. You'll open that pod up. The bean is loose in there. It's not attached to the pod anymore. If you've got good moisture at that point, you're good. But we want to keep good moisture until that point. Don't quit early on these soybeans. Rice is a little different. To me, there's some things that can go wrong with rice, much more so than corn and beans. And to me, it's almost an art to picking a drain date, irrigation termination on rice. So we really got to be careful on that. You don't want to drain too early. If it dries up, those plants can die off, they can start desiccating, falling over. You can have lodging, loss of yield, loss of milling. So we don't want to go too early and let that field dry out too early. On the other side, we don't want to go too late either, because we know what's going to happen then. You're going to cut over mud, and most people don't like that. Ruts the field up, but it costs a lot more to get it ready for planting the next crop next year. So let's avoid that too. So it's almost a balancing act. Don't drain too early, don't drain too late. You look at the university recommendations, their general recommendations, they like to see about 2/3 of that head or panicle straw colored. And they feel at that point, on silt loam soils, at least at that point, that you're good to let the water off, drain it. On heavy clay soils, we don't have as much of them right in our area. We're more silt loam. But on those, if you got 1/3 of that head straw colored, you're all right. So that's kind of some rules of thumb on draining rice. But again, you can't go strictly by those rules. You got to incorporate some other factors. What kind of soil it is. Again, we've talked about that a little bit, but if it's a sandy soil or soil that just doesn't hold water, you've got to go a little bit longer on those. If it's a heavier soil, you don't have to go as long. So use some judgment there. You have to look at the weather forecast as well. If you've got a forecast that's calling for 95 to 100 degrees with no rain in sight, you've got to wait a little bit longer generally to pull the plug on those fields. Another thing that I haven't really talked about that much in the past, but I had one farmer mention it to me. I've thought about it. Had one farmer mention it to me, is when are you going to cut the rice? I mean, just because it's at a certain stage and it fits these prescriptions that the university talks about, doesn't mean you want to go ahead and drain it, because if you've got a lot of acreage, small combine capacity, whatever reason it may be, a month or so before you're going to cut that field. And even though it may fit those parameters for draining that they've got, if it's going to sit out there for a month or more before you cut it, even though it is that far along now, you may want to hold that water a little bit longer. You want to keep that plant alive, healthy, so it doesn't desiccate, fall over, and cause those lodging issues and things like that. So again, to me, draining is an art. You got to know your ground, you got to know your soil type, you got to know your harvest plans, you got to know the weather forecast. Incorporate all those things and make a smart draining recommendation there or decision. I'll get calls on that all the time. Right now, that's about all I'm doing. I'm looking for some stink bugs in the later rice, but most of my time is spent trying to make drain recommendations for farmers, or at least when to turn the well off. So it's a big thing for rice. You got to do it right. You need to try to do it right, and hopefully you won't have a penalty if you do it right. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Harvest should begin probably the week after next. I'm looking for that week of the 21st. Again, there was some rice drain this week, so I think the week of the 21st, we're going to start seeing some rice harvest. Hopefully by the end of the month, some corn as well. So things are moving along, and hopefully we got a good one in the field, and I'll be letting you know about some yields that we're seeing on my next program in September. Until then, this has been Randy Klepetchka with your Farmers Supply Association Agri Report.